Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, wait. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wheelchair Repair and Service Task Force. My name is Beverly Brakeman, and everybody's on Zoom. So it's going to be a different meeting. Senator Seminara is unable to join us, and Representative Case is on Zoom. So thanks, everybody, for being here. If you're able to turn your cameras on, that would be great. So I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. Thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to start first by saying that if we aren't done by 1 o'clock, which I think we will be, we are going to end at 1 because I have a personal thing I have to do that I cannot change. But I think today is probably going to be a short meeting. I also, I think we spoke a lot about the survey last week. I think we're getting to a better handle on where people are at and what the concerns are and what things we want to put into place for good policy. I think there'll be things we agree on and there will be things we don't agree on. My understanding as I sort of explore how the report part of this goes, which has to be done by February 1st, is that the report will have a layout of the legislation and the research and information that we have gathered, and then very likely some sort of analysis of consensus items, non-consensus items, and some of the recommendations going forward. It will then go to the legislature for decisions to be made about actual legislation. So that's my understanding at this point of how this next phase, because I will have to start writing this report. And I think you've been working with me long enough to know that I won't do that in a bubble, and I will be very transparent about that. And I will do my best to present all of the different views that have come up, and all of the different ideas, and as much as I can be very comprehensive. So with that said, let's start with, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from last week?
The minutes that you submitted, this is David, the minutes that submitted and they're on the website does not reflect the changes that you agreed upon, that I submitted to you in email. So just to let you know.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Okay, so let's hold off on the minutes. We have made those changes, but we haven't been able to reflect them on the website or get them out. So we'll wait until the next meeting to approve those, okay? So moving on, we talked about the survey responses already, and went over my summary of that. I wanted to we had an issue come up at the last meeting about releasing the actual responses to the survey. And after speaking to the legal counsel for the committee and the Senate Democrats who appointed me, we will be releasing those after this meeting. So that is that. And then at the last meeting, Representative Smith and Senator Seminara had some questions that came up from the survey regarding staffing, and the industry has some responses to that. And then we can have more discussion. And I also want to, there is an analysis that Jonathan from the Consumers has put together, and I will be sending that to the industry to take a look at, to see if they want to respond to it. But that is not on the agenda today. So with that, I don't know who's going. Does anybody have any sort of opening remarks or anything they want to say as a follow-up to the last meeting, or questions?
Beverly, I just wanted to say, I apologize for not being there. I am on the road, but we're moving forward. We're coming to a conclusion, and we all have to pull together and get these documents and how we want to move. And I think we're getting in the right lane here, and let's just keep going forward. But I apologize once again for not being in there, but I'll be on the phone for you.
Thanks, Representative Case. Yeah, and I would, I would sort of echo that. There's a lot of work that has been done on this committee, and I think it's a work in progress, and we're gonna keep trying to move forward. And I think there's going to be some areas where we're going to agree to disagree, and but those will all be reflected in the report. So but I would also echo that my goal in all of this is to have something as substantive and real as possible to change the experience of people who live in wheelchairs, to change and improve their experience when it comes to repair and service. So with that, Wayne, or who would like to speak? Wayne, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go first. I think Gary had shared on the last thing that he had a meeting that he could not get out of to attend today. So he asked me to share the numbers from NewMotion. Diane is on here from NSM. She'll be sharing hers as well. So as I said before, I tried to, and I think I directed this, Representative Smith, you were the one that asked the question originally. So, I had told you that I had a hard time trying to factor in all the variables and so forth. There's just a lot of variables to this. So we did our best to factor in the different variables NewMotion did. And based on what we can forecast, we believe that the following number of technicians will help speed up the repair process. NewMotion has already requisitioned and has opened up 3 new tech positions, and they're recruiting for those right now. Okay. So that is something I would like to notate. They were under no requirement to do that, but they recognize that this is a problem, and it's been brought up, and I want the consumers to know that we have heard them. Okay. So I'm going to turn this over to Diane, and then I'd like to come back as well, because we have some other, what I think is going to be well-received news on some other staffing issues. So Diane?
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, so what we have right now is between our Newington and our Niantic locations, we have 5 road techs in Newington, and we have 3 for the Niantic. We have another one that's going in for another position in January that we're slated to get hired into and started for Newington. We have another one for Niantic. We're in the process. We're looking for another 3rd that will probably be a bridge that we still got to get approval for from our company on, that we're looking for a bridge tech between the 2 locations to help backfill some of those other things. The other thing too is we have to help with the backlog. Some of the things we already had in process before all these meetings started was come January, some SWAT teams that we're going to be doing into the field. We have that currently within the Massachusetts, and we know we're going to be bleeding that up into the Connecticut market for crossing over, and some rezoning that we're going to be looking at for more efficiencies on the backside for our tracking and road visits to try to maximize a little bit more. So there's a whole file of stuff that we're doing. There's more to come, but those are some of the things I know. That was a specific ask about more techs being hired and brought on.
Yeah, the other thing too, and thank you for bringing this up, Diane. NewMotion is doing a couple of things as well. Representative Case had mentioned in his industry, they bring other people in. They are bringing some other folks, I think from Kentucky, into the marketplace to get through the backlog and to speed that up. They've also contracted with another company to do some basic repairs. These are not going to be high-end chairs, but some tubes and some other things that they can outsource. But I will tell you, that same company is having some issues with people, but that's something they're going to be doing as well. And they are doing to go ahead and try to work through the backlog as best they can. Now, the other issue I want to share as well is the industry did hear folks.
Wayne, hold on a second. Can I, somebody just texted they can't hear. Can everybody on the Zoom hear? Okay. So Rick, that may be your computer because it looks like everybody else can hear. Okay. All right. My apologies, Wayne. I just wanted to
No
address
problem.
that.
Some other news as well on the industry did hear the consumers' issues as far as not being able to get through and some issues with customer service. NewMotion has opened up 2 new positions and they'll be hiring. They are in the process of recruiting right now for 2 new customer service positions as well. So they can go ahead and quicken up the response time and the communication process. So again, we've listened and they've gone ahead and done that now. Diane, do you have anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, we have a CSS that we mentioned that before in a previous meetings that we're still down that we're looking for. And also we have a new phone system that the company's going to be moving to in 2024. But until then, that's down the road. That's not going to happen right after the new year. But we do centralize some of these things. We do have some other things that we're looking to do to also help with the phone volumes. That always seems to be a concern.
Okay. So again, you can see that there's going to be, Diane, I think you said you got 2 positions you're hiring for or hired. NewMotion's adding, that's 5 new technicians and Diane's looking for a 6th, along with 3 new staffers on the customer service side to answer questions and to deal with customers as they call in. So.
Was that it, Wayne?
That's it regarding that. Jonathan had asked about some seasonality. So if you want me to address that now, I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? And then I actually have a question before Jonathan. So yeah, go ahead, Wayne. You might as well
Sure.
talk. Yep.
So Jonathan asked us, we'd shared some seasonality, asked us if we could provide some time periods and look at the different ones where we're seeing increases. And typically we've notated 2 bigger ones and 1 smaller one. The first one is in December, and that's typically due to people wanting to get things done before year end so they don't have to pay co-pays and deductibles the following year. And that's been standard for many, many years. We've also seen one in February and March, and where that's typically coming from is individuals, when they get a new chair, will use that chair and try it out, and then they're going to want typically adjustments done to make it more comfortable or to optimize it and so forth. And those typically happen in February to March, and it's about a 15% increase. There is a smaller uptick in the August-September time period, mostly for pediatric and young adults because they're going back to school, and that's about a 10% increase overall. So that's the seasonality we had mentioned prior.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. So my question, so the question I think that Representative Smith asked last week was, and I need the industry to tell me if this is just not a question you can answer, but you've hired some more techs, which is great. I think we've all assessed that that's part of how we get to a faster response time. But my question is, where does that get the industry in terms of, like, do you have a goal? Like, we have tossed around the 3 to 5 days to have a wheelchair assessed, potentially repaired, that kind of stuff. What is the industry's goal in that? Like, you've hired more people, so where are you hoping to move the ball to by hiring these more people, and that would be helpful.
Yeah, Beverly, I believe we believe that the 3 additional people, once we get through the backlog, because again, we have to do that, is going to get it down to it. Did I ask specifically, Gary, what the goal was? No, ma'am, I did not. I'll be more than happy to do that, and he can provide that information at the next call. But I didn't ask specifically. Again, what he did, from my understanding, is look at it and say, these 3 new positions, we're going to commit to them now. We believe once we get back through the backlog, including the outsourcing to the other company, bringing in additional people, which will help speed that up, this will be able to solve the problem. Can I give you an exact number right this second? No, ma'am, I cannot.
Okay. I have a comment, but I'm going to hold on to it. Well, I see Jonathan and Sheldon, you have your hands up. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Diane and Wayne. I just had some follow-up questions for Diane. You said you have 3 or 4 technicians in Niantic. Is it 3 or is it 4? And are those in shop or are those on the road?
Sorry, it might help if I unmute myself. So I have 3 in Niantic on the and Niantic. I have 3: Josh, William, and Alex.
Okay.
That are for them that are road. I have only one person, Jonathan, in the office.
Okay.
That gets set up. And I have 5 in Newington. If you want their names, I'm more glad to give your first names on these people, but I have 5 that are in Newington, and I have 5 that are in the shop.
So Newington, all 5 are in the shop, you said?
No, Newington has 5 on the road and 5 in the shop.
Okay, great. No, that's very, very helpful. And then, okay, I think that was in the go-between, those open positions are for on the road positions?
Yes. Yes.
And the third open position for the bridge, that's also an on the road position?
Yep.
Okay, great. And
keep in mind, I want to, if I may, Jonathan, I want to interrupt something because I think there's been some misunderstanding of some things here. So, our road techs do repairs, they'll do modifications, they do evaluations too. They do new chair deliveries. They help out with that. They do, don't forget, we also have other equipment that many of our customers are using, like beds, bath equipment, stuff like that. That's also part of what they do. And then, in shop, they do a lot of those same type of things, of course, not the setups in the homes or what have you, but they also do seating valves. They'll do other modifications. So when you're talking about all these things, I want to be very clear that everyone understands what all these technicians are doing out in the field. And what we're doing in the shops too of those. So I know this has been brought up in the past, exactly what all these things, and when you guys are looking at these numbers, let's be very specific about all this too. And so I just want to make sure everyone understands all the different things that they are doing out in the field.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And one of the questions, and you'll see in the analysis that I shared with you guys, which we'll discuss next week. I had a question about the repair rates, and this was back, I guess, on the November 16th presentation where you guys have talked about the 4.5 and 7.5 repair rates. I've always assumed that means like the rate of not only of repairs but like assessments, basically like interactions with a customer on a repair order. Or just on the top of your head, I know if there's needs to be more time to get a detailed answer, but am I right in understanding that's what the meaning behind like a repair rate? That's not like 4.5 repairs a day. Does that really translate into the equivalent of 4.5 assessments or repairs a day, or is it just repairs? You know what I mean?
That's typically, Jonathan, we're going to talk about what because this is why I wanted to bring that up. Because I think when you look at the 4.5 road visits, this is why I want to look at these. So these might be some repairs. This might be delivery of new equipment. Right. This is people that are on the road doing all of those different things.
Right. So it's not just repairs, it's 4.5.
Yes, home visits a day. So when you're looking at that, that's kind of like how we're coming in and hitting those things.
Absolutely.
So when you're looking at all those numbers, well, we pulled that up and looked at when we did our monthly averages, like 4 to 5 a day stops, looking at all those that were under the repair bucket, right? That's not including everything else that we're talking about for on top of the other things they might be doing in between. So sometimes you have fluctuations. Some days are going to be, I can get 4. Some days they might have someone that just has a massive problem and we get 3 done with that technician that day. So it fluctuates. And so we say 4.5 when we look at an average throughout the whole year. Keep in mind, that's on average when you look at it. Some are better, some are worse. It depends on the ebb and flow, what's coming in, all of the different things that we spoke about in on previous meetings. So I want to be very transparent with that. I mean, we show the actual numbers. These were not skewed in any which way, shape, or form. And that's why you guys looked at and asked how many other products that we applied over the year. We gave you that information, whether it was what we say ADLs, activity daily, that we beds, baths, and other equipment. You had scooters that were something different. So you wanted to see how much we had in that rolling 12. We gave you all that. So that's not including all the visits and all the stops on that. We did give you the data on Vista repairs.
Yep, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then Wayne, you mentioned for the seasonality increases, you said February and March were 15% increase, August was 10% increase. Is that right?
December is going to be your highest one, Jonathan. That's going to be probably 15 or 20. And again, just remember, what you do is you have a rollover January 1. So if people haven't met their deductible, okay, or they've met their deductible for the previous year, they want to try to get that year so it doesn't roll over. Because as of January 2nd, they would have to then pay out of pocket or pay the copay. So we see a little bit higher. That's probably closer to 20%. The February and March is about 15%. And again, for August, I would say, it's about 10%, because really what you're dealing with is you're dealing with kids who are getting back to school. So a lot of times we get a call from the mother or something like that to go ahead and, check out the chair. And maybe there's a problem with it that they haven't wanted to deal with during the summer because the kids have been active. So they call us to come out and look at the stuff there. I'd also like to point out too, is again, that, just as a reminder, we talk about stops and so forth. Please remember, and Jonathan, I want to thank you guys for supporting this, but there is no coverage, there is no funding for that travel time. Okay. And you guys have been very nice to say that you believe it should be covered. So again, just want to remind everybody and thank you for that. So
yeah, absolutely. And those increases, that obviously those are the increases of the repair requests, right?
Overall requests.
Overall requests. So that's assessments, right?
It could assessments, new equipment. Because again, think about this: if a person's getting a piece of new equipment, let's just say it's a higher end chair, it's a $10,000 chair, and they have a deductible of $1,000, they're going to want to get that before December 31st, so they're not responsible for that $1,000 if they've already met that deductible.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the last thing, and maybe you can answer this next week, is I know that the numbers that we were given for the average monthly repairs in shop and in home, which are the average monthly repairs / assessments, right? In shop or in home. Is it possible to get the number of the requests? Because I'm assuming that number is higher than the actual number of repairs that are being done on average.
I've got to ask, I can't speak for Gary because he's not here. I don't know if they can pull those numbers, but I'll ask.
Okay, yeah, that would just
Jonathan, can you explain that? I'm not quite understanding. So if you're making an ask and you actually have an actual concern with your chair, we're going to open up a work order for that no matter what.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what your ask is on that.
So the average monthly repairs / assessments that are conducted in shop and home, we have those numbers.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are actually conducted. So that speaks to the capacity of the companies to go out and meet with customers and do repairs or assessments. I'm asking, is it possible to get the average monthly requests? So in other words, like the demand as opposed to what is actually on average completed per month.
Typically what you do on that, because I think I know what you're trying to ask now.
Yeah.
The majority of those numbers are there, even including it, because we've had some people that will put it in, and even if they drop or cancel or decide to not go through, we have those numbers and we pull that out from there. But that's typically maybe Jonathan, a couple percentages. I'm talking 2 or 3%, because the majority of time, once we start something, we got it, we track it. And if it's not completed, we'll track those also. So I don't think you're going to see as high as a number, which you may think that's being maybe missed. If that's what you're asking for, there might be cancellations or someone lost insurance and then they can't go through because they don't want to pay out of pocket or something of that nature. I mean, there's not going to be a whole significant volume differential
Right.
coming in for that.
Right. I guess the overall question is, each month are more repairs / assessments being done than are being requested, or is it about equal, or is
It's
it
probably about equal. I don't think there's
Okay.
really, I think it's really not enough to state either way. There's other than, like I said, a few cancellations here or there, or someone switches insurance or something changes. I don't think it's a significant differential, Jonathan, that it's going to do anything with the data that you're trying to
okay?
obtain.
All right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jonathan, if you could put that in writing, I got to be honest with you, I tried to follow all that. So if you'll put that in writing and get that to Beverly, she can get that to us.
Sure.
She'll look at- Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, were you all set, Jonathan?
I'm all set for now. Thank you.
Okay. Sheldon, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I thank you, Wayne, Diane, and I agree with Diane. It's important to get it accurate. I just want to make sure I understand the numbers. That's all. I'm trying to figure that out. And I think that NSM has been pretty consistent in saying you have 8 on the road and 6 in the shop, total of 14. And you broke that down just now between Niantic and Newington. And you're planning on hiring, did you say 3 or 4?
We're going to get 2 more, and we're looking for a position for what I call a floater between the 2 locations to be a bridge tech.
Okay.
I
So
haven't got
hiring,
the approval for that, so I'm not going to say that yet until I get the approval, because I
Okay,
know how you are,
okay.
Todman. So
Okay.
until I get approval.
okay,
It's
all right. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to get that's all. So basically, what you're planning on doing is going from 14 to 16 or 17 if you get approval, correct? All right, so that's your shop. And then for New Motion, it's very confusing. You know, a few weeks ago, we were told there were 6. Then we were told there were 14. And last week, I think we were told there were 10. There were 8. If I have that right, wrong, Wayne, you'll correct me. But as I understand it, David did ask specifically, and your answer was there are 8 in the field and maybe 2 in the shop.
Okay, it wouldn't have been my answer because the question would have been posed to Gary.
To
Okay?
Gary, yeah.
It's my understanding it's 14 right now with an additional 3, which will be up to 17. And again, if we want to get that confirmed, which I know you do, please submit that to Beverly and we'll confirm it with Gary. Again, he apologizes, but this is a meeting he could not change.
Right.
So,
I mean, because we can check, maybe it's in the minutes, I don't know, but we really kind of drilled down a little bit on this last week. And one of the things Gary said was that he had lost 3. So,
Okay.
I mean,
Sheldon,
that's, yeah.
again, you're
Okay.
asking me to answer a
No,
question.
you don't know.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So I guess it'd be really helpful to know if you said New Motion. I'm just going by what you said. You said New Motion is going to hire 3 more, right?
You've already put out the requisitions
Okay.
and they're actively recruiting for 3 service technicians and 2 additional customer service
Okay.
service people.
So I guess the question for and maybe it's an email from Bev or whatever, but is after you requisition the 3 techs, how many techs total will that be? That's really the question.
My understanding would be 17 techs, 14 plus 3. But again, let's confirm it with Gary. So please send that
Okay.
to Beverly and we'll confirm it.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
So, one of I feel like we could spend probably the next month talking about data, and staffing numbers and that kind of stuff. And I think it's important. We know from the industry that, one of the ways to reduce repair time is by having more trained staff. But from a bigger perspective, as the chair, I really need us to start moving towards what is it that we really need to have happen here. And I'm not convinced that saying if we have 10 staff members, we're going to be able to repair all wheelchairs in 3 days. I'm not sure I think that's realistic. I would ask people to respond to that if you'd like if you can. However, what I think we want, and I feel like there's a goal here that everybody has, of reducing the repair time to a certain amount. And how we get there is probably where the differences of opinions are going to come in, and how we enforce that and how we make that a real thing for consumers, which I believe is very important. So I guess I just, at the risk of sounding like a nudge, I think that all this data crunching and back and forth about staffing is not unimportant, but I'm not sure it moves us to a place we need to be, which is to make really big picture recommendations about what needs to be changed. Because the reality is, from what I have learned, is these companies could have 500 staff and not be able to meet a certain repair timeline, or fewer staff and be able to reach, and be able to reach a timeline. So to me, what I'm more concerned about is having something substantive that consumers can rely upon, so they're not living in chairs and complex rehabilitation technology that is not healthy or safe for them for long periods of time, which is how we got here in the first place. So I guess I just want to say that, and I'm going to continue to sort of move us towards, we have to have a report done by February 1st. So I'm going to just sort of continue to be on that track. So anyway, but I have some hands now. So Jonathan Slifka, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Beverly. A question for Wayne in the industry. There was talk about backlog, and you brought in additional people, and you said that you needed to address the backlog first, before lowering the wait times currently. How big is the backlog currently, and how long? What is your estimation or the goal in terms of getting that down to where there is no longer a backlog? I don't think that question's been asked at this point.
I believe that we shared that information, Jonathan. I don't have that in front of me, how big the backlog is, but we did share that previously I believe in our presentation. Diane, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we did address that before. It's easily, if I had all my parts and pieces and everybody, and I had my whole SWAT team to get out there, it'd probably take us a good solid 8 to 12 weeks to get the backlog all caught up. That's all new equipment, all the things that have been on hold, all the things that we've been trying to get all caught up on. It's just unfortunately what's happened in this past year was a flipping frickin' storm of perfect bad things all at once. So what we're looking at right now, to be honest, I would say, and I talked with our ops team the other day, easily it's going to take them up through January into February to get it all caught up. And then what we're doing with the teams to get everything, along with everything that still keeps coming in. And so that's what we're trying to do, these pulling from other areas where we can, but again, that makes it short in other areas, but we're trying to get all these things in that we can, because even with us hiring all the people on, getting them trained up takes a couple months, and then getting them out. And we do have a third party that we work with, but again, they're not as efficient as we like them to be. So it's easily, we're talking a good solid 2 months to get caught up with everything, minimally.
Did that answer your question, Jonathan?
It did. Thank you.
So I think, Diane, one of the things I would say that I have heard Senator Seminara say, who's not here, is while I think everybody has appreciation for the backlog, COVID, set everybody back to some extent. In a lot of the consumers' experiences, and I think Senator Seminara has said this, it wasn't good before. So I think the backlog is important to get rid of, but what is the industry's response to how it's going to be better than it was before once we get rid of the backlog? And you may not have an answer to that now.
Yeah,
trying to be antagonistic, but that is
I think I have some answers I can get, because you guys asked for this before pre-COVID, right? When things were supposedly decent at the time. And when I looked at our Connecticut numbers, and that on a good average, we were doing probably like 39 days for repairs on average when we look at that. Now, when you look at that, I can speak for this from the insurance side of it and looking at it, all those sides, we had some of the stats that we looked at. Typically, it's anywhere between 8 to 10 days for approvals to get the repair. So that takes away right there, right off the bat when we're waiting on some things. And then once you get it, getting them all scheduled. Like we said before, I have only one location that ever does in branch repairs. And this is even beforehand, everything was pretty much done in a home. And so typically those scheduling, once they get up booked out, they're typically 2 to 3 weeks out. So in the times of when it was supposedly good for us at the time, realistically, it was averaging like around 39 days, which is what for no matter what, it wasn't enough. So this is where you come back with the staffing. So even if we get everything caught up, what is that picture going to look like? Well, in order for us to do 3 or 5 days that's being thrown around, one, I have to get rid of that approvals process, which we all talked about. 2, how do I get that scheduled enough? So basically, even if I have a staff of 10 and I got them all scheduled and I have someone that's hard down, I'm going to have to bump somebody else to go get it. So when you're talking about these realistic timelines of 3 to 5 days, it's going to be a challenge because everything's pretty much being done in the home. And how do we schedule that? And how do we route that? And how do we get that? We're not a AAA mobile service that's, even if you call, you got to wait 4 or 5 hours for them to come to you. That's the reality of what we got to try to figure out. How is this working? Now, some of the things that we're doing right now too with this process, looking at our insurance that we do have, if we know the repair is under a certain dollar threshold, we don't have to wait for the approval. We're just going to go ahead and schedule it. There's some of the routing that was talked about earlier, some of the pre-scheduling that we're looking at doing. So there's certain things that we're looking at. So for us to be able to go and say, give you a hard-coded 3 or 5 day notice, I'm going to say no. That's not the reality of what we're dealing with right now with the criteria of what we have to deal with. Can we get to the point where we want to be much shorter? Absolutely. Do we want it to get not what we're dealing with? Absolutely. But for the reality for me to come to you, Senator, and say, this is what we're going to hold to, I can't. Now, I'll be telling a fib. And I'm not going to state that on record because this is the reality of what we're dealing with. So we got to figure out a way of doing this. One timeline working with our insurance plans and how we get it done. 2, how do we route this and get it maximized, because it is going to be in the home 95% of the time. And how do we get this to go faster and quicker on our side of it? So there's various things that we're working on all at once. But for me to give you a hard-coded timeline, it isn't going to happen today because of those various reasons I just spoke to.
Hey, thanks, Diane. I guess and Representative Case, I see you have your hand up, but I think to just counter that a little bit is the question that has been hanging over us this entire time. If you obviously, there's a lot of reasons this can't be done within the 3 to 5 day period. What is reasonable for the industry? I know you can't answer it now. You don't have staff.
But here's some things that are reasonable to ask, right? So if we're able to have some of those other technologies that we're using, if at least get an evaluation, if we're able to do with the client, within that a day or 2 or whatever, if we can do the remote, we know that doesn't work for everybody. It's not feasible for everybody. So we're trying to look at prioritizing how we're going to get that done. If we have someone that's in the area of can we reroute them, we're looking at those type of things. It's not going to be something I can give you. I can give you 5 buckets of things that can be done in a certain timeline. But at the end of the day, it's not going to really matter for our consumers because at the end of the day, they want it done like yesterday. So, I mean, even with what I'm proposing to you and sharing some of these things, we're still dealing with the reality of X, Y, and Z. And to be able to do those things in the timelines, it's going to be a challenge.
And I think I can certainly speak for myself. And I think probably everybody on the call that there's a lot of appreciation for that. This is not an easy industry. These are not one size fits all pieces of equipment. However, in the absence of some sort of, here's what we can do from the industry, people are going to say, well, here's what we want. And yeah, it's actually not unreasonable for a consumer to want their chair fixed in a day, because who wants to live in a 20-year-old chair for 3 months while theirs is being fixed. So I want to be really clear. I appreciate all the frustrations on all sides, but I think the frustration that you all are coming up against is sort of, we understand what all your problems are to committing to something, but what can you commit to that consumers can rely upon? And that is the question we've been asking since day one. So I just think, and I have no idea what that is for the industry. And if it's absolutely not a possible number to come up with, then maybe there's a what can you live with number. So I guess I'll just turn it over to Representative Case.
Thank you, Beverly. And, you know, this is great conversation. I get one of the questions that I haven't had answered, and I don't know if it's even been asked, but in the industries, we always ask, what are shovel-ready projects? What are chairs or work orders that are ready to go to be fixed? Ones that aren't waiting for parts, ones that aren't waiting for approvals. Would bringing more people in outside actually solve the backlog, or are we still waiting for parts and approvals? Because that's some of the low-hanging fruit that we can work on legislatively to change the approval times, but we can't change the waiting on parts time. So does anybody know off the top, what is the percentage of actual repairs that are ready to go, but need somebody to put them in a van and go do them?
I can't speak for New Motion, Representative Case. I'll be more than happy to ask them. I don't remember that ever being asked, but I will follow up with Gary and get some numbers from New Motion. Diane, I'm not sure if you can have that.
No, but you got to understand that. You got to understand that if we bring more employees in, but if the parts aren't here or you don't have the approvals to do it, what does it do to bring more people in?
Yep.
We need to make sure that you have the parts and you have the approvals. And if we can change the approval time, darn it, let's do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Representative Case, I can answer for you on that one. I can say well over 2/3 of our backlog parts are in, and we're trying to get them out the door. And so what you're talking
Right.
about, that's why we're prioritizing things. We got things, we're just trying to get them on, getting them scheduled, getting them out the door. That's part of the SWAT team that I was speaking to kind of get all this. Like, we got ready to go type of things. We have maybe the other third or half, we're still waiting on either joysticks or we're waiting for approvals, what have you. So for part of that, there's still some things that were lingering. So part of that backlog, I can say fairly confidently, well, over 60% of it's ready to go, basically. Just maybe
Thank you. So that helps.
design. That's
That
what we're trying to get the SWATs into to punch this out. And those things that are to the point where you're saying low-lying fruit, simple things, fast things, how we're going to do this. That's how we're going to try to take the people coming in to help out to knock those out of the way.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. So we
Yeah,
bring in people,
and there's still
it is
some
going to
things
make a
that,
difference.
yeah, and there's still things we're trying to do with the insurance side of it. What can we do? Whether we do PO orders with the manufacturers, what we call in the industry credit accept, like take the risk, right? This 9 times out of 10 gets approved. Let's just go ahead and order the part if we know that's what the right one for the client. Get it in and get it out the door, and work on the back end.
Good.
A little bit. We're starting to do that, but a lot of times, Representative, I'll be honest with you, we get hit in the teeth sometimes on that too, and end up writing these things off too. So it's a gamble, but we know it, and that's what we're doing. So those things are in process, and I'm pretty sure Gary at New Motion is doing the same thing.
Perfect. Thank you. You answered it.
Yep.
Okay, was that it, Representative Case?
Thank you, Beverly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Diane. Jonathan Sigworth.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question, Representative Case. I mean, that also speaks to the importance of why, getting more employees to get those orders out that are all ready to go is a really important goal. And I just want to highlight that, 4 weeks ago, we weren't talking about how many open positions there were. We were talking about how, New Motion and NSM were fully staffed. So I think that we are making incredible progress, and I really thank you all for working hard on that. In terms of the 5-day target, let's just imagine hypothetically that we were to recommend, a business week as the target for getting an initial assessment done, and then a follow-up in-home repair visit done. I don't think any of us consumer advocates are believing that if we were to get legislation that put that in place tomorrow, that would be accomplished tomorrow. I think very realistically, we would expect there to be a ramp up time as you hire more staff, and ramp up to that capability. So I don't think that we should look at any timeline target as impossible, and that if we recommend legislation for that we build in some reasonable amount of time for the industry to adjust and to make that possible. I mean, there's probably already going to be that built in. If we pass legislation, it's probably not going to pass till the summer or next fall, right? So there is a lot of time already, even if we come up with a hard deadline, say 5 business days. And the other thing I want to kind of discuss further is, Wayne and others have mentioned, for the timeline, there need to be some built-in exceptions, and I would be open to discuss any others that we should add to the list, such as, if we have a 5-day requirement for, let's just say, an in-home assessment, that should obviously, the consumer should have the ability to waive that if for whatever reason they're fine with it going beyond 5 days. That should also, in my opinion, that shouldn't be required if the consumer cancels or does not appear for an appointment or cannot appear for an appointment, like if they are hospitalized, for example. So just on that question, are there any other exceptions that the industry would like to see hypothetically for that 5-day requirement that would seem reasonable and fair?
Jonathan, I'm going to have to get back to you. I mean, first of all, those two, thank you for bringing those up. There are always exceptions, and we know that people cancel for certain reasons that are beyond their control. Okay. So I appreciate that, and the ability to give the consumer, again, consumer choice is a big issue. We would be concerned with supply chain issues. Okay. We want to be able to control the things that we can control. Okay. So if there is a supply chain shortage, and guys, I realize everybody thinks it was just during the pandemic. There were also some other issues where we maybe had a week or a 2-week delay. Nothing like what we saw, thank God. Okay. But if you'll let me come up with a list, we can work on that. I'd like to talk with Diane and a few others, but I also got to involve the manufacturers because there may be some things I don't recognize.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable. I mean, to be clear though, this is for, this 5 days hypothetical again. This is for coming out to do an in-home assessment. So there shouldn't be any supply chain issue in doing an assessment. And then this is also for doing the in-home repair after parts have come in. So there shouldn't. So just to be clear, that's the scenario we're talking about.
Thank you for clarifying that. I thought the way you laid it out was 5 days from assessment to getting it done all within that 5 days as the example. So let me come back with some ideas on that. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So I see that Sheldon, you have your hand up, but I want to also just say something, follow up to what I just said. I also, at the same time, I said, what I said about for the question that's been out there for a long time. I also want to acknowledge the industry for being at the table in an informal way and in a formal way, and for being responsive to lots and lots of questions and putting information forward and being honest in many ways about the challenges you have to providing the service. So so I want to acknowledge that, had you not been at the table, we wouldn't be able to have these difficult questions. So, but I still do think we need to get to some sort of thing that makes the experience of consumers better. And I know you agree with that. And it's going to be how we get there. As I said in the beginning, that's going to be the challenge. But I did want to acknowledge that being at the table is an important part of being able to participate in this task force. So with that, I have Sheldon and then Rep. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And those that's fair to express appreciation for the coming to the table and being able to engage so we can have these conversations that I'm sure to some folks are sometimes annoying, but in order to really drill down and figure out the cause of the problem and therefore the solution. I did want to, I was raise my hand to actually say this, and then Jonathan covered it, and that is that when we're talking about timelines, proposed timelines, mandatory timelines, that's really only for the part that's within the control of the wheelchair suppliers, because of course, if you don't have the part, you don't have the part. And that was never the intention to address that. Although, for the other things, we are supporting the proposals to remove prior authorization, et cetera, so we can reduce the other things that are not within your control. I did also want to point out in response to Representative Case's question that when the consumer advocates did their presentation on November 9th, I think it is, we actually, and thanks to Jonathan, had a very detailed chart that actually show the number of days and which days of delay were attributed to, for example, prior authorization, waiting for parts, versus the part where the wheelchair company just could not get out there for assessment or for doing the repair after the parts had come in and prior auth was done. And as Diane said, it's roughly 2/3, sometimes it's 80-82% of the time is the delays with the company, depending upon whether there is a parts delay. But it's all laid out if anybody's interested. You can really see in detail the apportionment of where the delay is, and therefore you can see that if we were to address the 2/3 of it roughly, which is related to the wheelchair suppliers, we could really make a big dent in the delay problem. Thank you.
Is that it, Sheldon?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to underscore something you just mentioned, Madam Chairman. I too acknowledge and have been thoroughly impressed by the earnestness and the helpfulness that has been displayed by the supplier manufacturer side on this. I realize that this is seemingly a government inquiry regarding convenience and essential service to a vulnerable part of a segment of our population. And I know Wayne and Gary and Diane and all of you people on the supplier side are personally devoted to this cause and trying to make their services better. And it really does come across. So I know it always seems like it's a government imposition trying to meddle in something that we don't understand, and which brings me back again to this business of staffing. If 90% of what this task force is engaged to do, which is to improve the turnaround time and increase in-home repair service, obviously adding new techs and new customer service people can only help to reduce that. I know it's not the only thing that's within your control, but it is probably the essential question that's going to lead. When we do this report, there's other things, the prior authorization, a lot of other things that we've discussed that I think we've uncovered some interesting information. Wayne did say on behalf of New Motion, they were adding 3 new techs to the 14. My question is, and certainly under no obligation to reveal this, but I think it's important to know, what are the implications in terms of pricing back to the consumer? Is this something, if you add 3 new techs, obviously that's 3 new salaries, it's benefits, it's training, it's all the things that go with that. And it's obviously not understood to be something of no cost to your industry.
And without getting into the machinations or what is decided at the corporate level here, what do you expect the pricing implications, if there are any? Is this these three new techs to be?
There's no implication. I'm going to interrupt, Rob. There's no implications to the consumer. It's
Okay.
all cost on us.
Yep.
We get nothing. It just
Save
works.
for the-
Okay, I wanted to know, because I'm saying if you
Yeah.
still put three new techs on, that means keeping status quo in terms of, and obviously it's not that easy to say we're just jacking up our price to reflect the greater staffing obligations we have. Obviously, this is something you felt that you could do within the current pricing structure. So and then obviously the insurance companies and some of the underwriters and other people involved in this would likewise have something to say about it. But so that answers my question: is these three new techs, for instance, at New Motion, are all going to be could be brought on, trained, and part of your full-time staff without any effects on the pricing that goes out to the general public in the near term?
So Representative Smith, let me explain something. So it doesn't matter if the insurance, how we get reimbursed across the board stays the same. Our rates have been in place, well, most of our agreements since 2018, 2019. There's not been any changes in rate improvements or changes in reimbursement. We don't get reimbursed for evaluations. We don't get reimbursed for visits. We don't get reimbursed. All we get reimbursed for is for that component and that one final stop for the labor. That's it. The price changes have been in place for years in the Connecticut market. Between Medicaid, Medicare rates have only just recently been adjusted this past year for CPI, and all the commercial plans have definitely not increased their rates or changed their rates. In fact, they went the opposite direction. So there is nothing that goes to the consumer other than whatever the consumer's plan is for the commercial side, whatever their high deductible might be. That might be something, but that has nothing to do with us. That is price set by the insurance plans. We work within those. That's part of the struggle why you probably only have two of us providers left standing in the state, because so many people have left the marketplace because they no longer afford to do it. And unfortunately, it's left to two dogs now in this fight who are still doing it. But we're struggling with it because our reimbursements have been the same for years, but our costs have gone up significantly over the past 4 or 5 years. And that hasn't changed. I still got to work within that means as my company. And that's the struggle that we're dealing with. So with these pressures and with the fact there's two of us left and now we're holding the plate, so to speak, we got to make this work somehow now. I wish there was more people in the industry. I wish there was more people coming to the forefront to do CRT services and repairs, but there's a reason why there isn't. They can't afford to do it anymore. And it's left to the two of us, unfortunately.
And how does that happen? If these rates haven't been changed since 2018, who initiates it? Does the industry, is the Medicaid, when they decide?
It's got to be legislative. It's got to be CMS. And if you know anything about our insurance plans, they typically do a percentage of CMS for reimbursement. Medicaid is legislative. It's within your guys' control what you guys for your reimbursement process. These are things that we've been doing as an industry. I can speak from, working with Wayne and NCARD and AA Home Care and some of the things that we've been struggling in the certain buckets of our business and industry. And we're trying to address it, but it adds up. And this is now we're at this crux of all these things that have happened over these 4 or 5 years. We're struggling. And well, I'm just being very blunt because I do all the contracts for our company. I know all what our insurance reimburse. I know all the things they're doing for each state. I know what CMS is doing. I know what Medicaid is doing. And we're working within those confines. And then that's the struggles. I mean, that's the reality. But nothing is going to get passed on to the customer from this with us taking on. It's just cost that we eat.
Yeah, Representative Smith, I would tell you, this is what's caused companies to have to make very large investments into efficiency. And that's routing systems, that's inventory systems. They had to get better at what they had to do because they had to try, to deal with these changes in cost without any reflecting the reimbursement. I can tell you that both New Motion and NSM, from the start. So when you first introduced your bill, I reached out to you right away saying we wanted to work with you, we recognize this is a problem. We want to fix it. We realize that staffing is one component, absolutely. And we do appreciate the opportunity for everybody to get on these calls and identify those other areas. So again, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Diane and Wayne. Obviously there are areas where at least the two consumer and industry groups agree. And there's lots of different pots to that payer status issue, as we know, which is a whole other web to untangle. But before you go, Jonathan, I had a question for the industry in terms of the two, just being the two providers. One of the ideas that was in the summary of survey responses was sort of the idea of opening up the market to, and I understand that is problematic because this is not an area where companies can make money. But I'm wondering about, sort of a public option opportunity or something like that, where there's a nonprofit group that could do. Has there ever been anything like that? Has anybody heard of that? And do industry folks or anybody have a thought about that in terms of, it seems like everybody sort of thinks opening up the market would not be a bad thing. At least I think, but I'm sort of interested in if people have any thoughts about that option.
I'll let Diane go first, and then I have a couple of thoughts as well.
Yeah, there's something. So there's a couple of things. Keeping in mind that these are medical devices that needs to be, so whoever's paying for the repair, whoever, they got to make sure they're certified and all the things that we shared earlier in our sessions. So for example, however, your sister state over there in Massachusetts, they're using some of those ARPA funds that Mass Health has decided to work with. I believe they might be Easter Seals. They haven't finalized them and presented exactly who's the intermediary working on this to kind of help out with some minor repairs to what you're speaking to. And there's some things that are out there, and we're working with them, and they have some proposals already done, RFIs that were done, some of the things that they're looking at, a third party, someone that's very familiar with the industry, someone that's very familiar with the consumers, and they're hiring someone specifically to kind of run that program that would be certified and trained, etc. And then they will be working in turn with us providers to kind of submit to the insurance as an intermediary, like a third party administrator for them type of thing. There are some ideas like that out there. It's just the logistics and getting someone back and to make sure they meet the criteria that's required by all your insurance plans when they're doing it through that, because most of this is always going to be via insurance. So those are some of the hurdles that they had to get through. It's not an easy thing to get off the ground. Massachusetts has been trying to do it now for over past 9 months. And it's still in that planning stage because there's a lot that goes to it. Some of the things that we already reviewed with you guys, but if you're talking about something like a bike shop or something of that nature, that's when you're going to run into some of those compliance concerns. But I'm up for whoever can help out. But it's got to be in compliance, and that's the problem that we run into.
Yeah.
Wayne,
Yeah, thank you, Diana. Just a second, Wayne, I want to respond to that. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody is interested in reducing standards. And when I was talking about nonprofits, I certainly wasn't talking about bike shops, although I know many wheelchair users and one very close to me who routinely fixes their own wheelchair and goes to bike shops because it's just easier. And it can get done faster, but not all consumers are able to do that. So
yeah, exactly. Especially if it's a simpler, smaller, manual chair or something of that nature. Absolutely. I turned the wrench on my own cousin's chair. So, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Thanks, Diane. Wayne, did you want to respond also?
Yeah, and Sheldon, you may have to, I think you remember these guys. There used to be an organization, I don't know if they're still around. I used to live in Connecticut and I was a rep. Do you remember NEAT? I think it was NEAT, that back in the day, this is many years ago, you could donate equipment to and they would refurbish it. But I also think they did repairs. Are they still around? They are. Okay. That may be an avenue.
They are. Yes.
Okay. That may be an avenue to do that. And again, as Diane said, we're not opposed to opening up other people. All we ask is they meet the same requirements. So they got to get the training and so forth. And there are things beyond that, you know, the manufacturers are going to request them to take the training, because as you get into more intricate equipment, they've got to have the training to do it. We would ask anybody to stay away from clinical, simply because clinical should be decided between the patient and the therapist, okay, and the ATP. And we're not opposed at all. I think we shared that we believe that consumers should have the right to buy some of those parts from providers and so forth. We're not opposed to that at all. We would love to have more people providing these services. So,
thank you, Wayne. Okay, I just want to, I see Jonathan, Sheldon, Rick, and I just want to remind people that we will be ending right at 1. Okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you. Also, I just want to point out, there's this, I've mentioned this before, there's this great report done by Eileen O'Grady, who talks about, you know, durable medical equipment suppliers in the US and kind of what's been happening with consolidation. That's one of the main reasons why there aren't that many other companies besides NewMotion and National Seating and Mobility. And one of the driving factors behind that has been Medicare's policy for determining what companies can be recognized as suppliers through the competitive bidding process, which essentially favors larger national companies that are able to outbid smaller companies. So as consumer advocates, you know, we really don't see the real push for the solution as making it, you know, pushing for other people to come into the space, because as it is right now, it's very difficult. If I wanted to open up a small wheelchair repair company, you know, not to blame you guys, but NSM and NewMotion would be able to outbid me for those contracts, and it would be very difficult. And also, just to point out, as I mentioned in the presentation, you know, since 2013, NSM has acquired at least 42 other companies, and NewMotion has acquired at least 25 other companies. So there have been other companies in the space. But just to clarify for you, Representative Smith, that's why there are not more. It's not that people haven't wanted to get into this space. It's that it's just become a very difficult environment unless you are a large national company.
Yeah, I need to address something though that's unfortunately, Jonathan, maybe you don't understand the competitive bidding program. The competitive bidding program was not built on a higher price. It was built on a lower price.
No,
okay?
I know. That's what I...
The lowest bidder came in, and CMS, and I'm going to be very, because I dealt with this. CMS awarded contracts to individuals that never should have gotten contracts because they felt like they could sell those to other individuals, okay? So you got to remember that. I would also tell you, as I mentioned, I was a rep in that area. There was a very good company named Maxim Mobility based in New Haven that went out of business because they just couldn't afford to do it, to continue to do these things. So this idea that NSM and NewMotion are buying everybody up, a lot of times it's just these people come and they say, hey, will you take my business? Okay. But there is some value to these private equity companies that you keep inciting and saying that they're the reason why of all this. They put investments in. I mentioned to Representative Smith, these investments about telephone and routing and all that. Okay. These are things that smaller companies can't do. Okay. But the private equity companies do that, okay? So NewMotion and NSM have made those investments. If you'll come into our location, you can see, just look at our shop. There's at least $50,000 to $75,000 worth of investments in tools and inventory and equipment to do the repairs, okay? This is not an easy business. It does take revenue and it does take dollars to get into the business. That's why a lot of folks don't do it. Then they look at the economics and they go, I can't make it work. So
keep in mind too, Wayne, just to add on, keep in mind, Jonathan, during the competitive bid, what you're referencing, that was only for standard wheelchairs, like the group ones. Complex wheelchairs were never in competitive bid. They're exempt since 2008 for the PAMPA laws. So that, just keep that in mind. So that has nothing to do with that. And in fact, the smaller mom and pops get a little bit of benefit because they get a better reimbursement when they do the cost plus model with most of the states. So just FYI, I don't think you realize that the complex rehab codes were not part of that competitive bid other than the basic manual wheelchairs that standard DME companies could probably do.
Yeah, thanks, Diane.
Okay.
It was one
Yeah,
of the clarifications I thought what you said. So Jonathan, are you done now? Because I want to go to the next two people.
Yeah, I just really quickly wanted to clarify. As I said before, I'm not necessarily opposed to private equity. I just wanted to point out to Representative Smith that it's the outbidding for the lowest price, right? And we sympathize that maybe the reimbursements are not enough. I just wanted to explain that that's why it favors larger companies and it's harder for small companies. I didn't mean that to cast shade. Wait, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons
Yeah.
this is a challenging market. So, but I think this is a good discussion too. So I want to go to Sheldon and then Rick.
Thank you. The exchanges there mostly address what I was going to raise my hand for, but I think it's important to understand this is not a situation where we're worried about there won't be any companies left. In a situation where they're aggressively acquiring, as the numbers show, aggressively acquiring companies throughout the country, they think it's profitable. And, there is some evidence that they're actually quite profitable. So I don't think even though the competitive bidding thing is a problem for sure, I don't think this is a situation where we have to worry about like, oh no, there won't be anybody left. That is not, it's not an industry that's going the way of the horse and buggy. It's actually quite profitable. It's just that for the reasons Jonathan said, as well as the acquisitions which tend to go with private equity, that's the way the industry is going to be, to that consolidation. To answer the question that Wayne asked, yes, NEAT was created as a nonprofit to basically recycle used equipment and refurbish it, and they're still going strong, and it's great. It's a great program, but that I don't think that's a serious competitor for the kind of stuff we're talking about for the original acquisition and stuff. But I'm not opposed to the nonprofits. I work in a nonprofit. It's just that may not be a realistic approach here.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember, Sheldon. So,
yeah, thanks.
Was that it, Sheldon?
That is all. You expect me to talk some more? I don't know. I can try to say something.
Always. Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of mentioned about the NEAT too. I think some of the issues were around the reimbursements for using used equipment for repairs with NEAT back then too. Yeah, that would be some sort of a good idea. Yeah, I just want to comment on the, my history with me going through my wheelchairs. There were more companies, as Wayne had pointed out. Max Mobility was one of them. But yeah, I've seen them get bought out multiple times. I mean, New Motion in my eyes kind of started out as Hamden Surgical back in the day, because then it morphed into, I don't remember the exact order, but Connecticut Rehab, ATG Rehab, and then New Motion or whatever it was in between. And as each time they got bigger, they kind of offered less and less. I mean, there were times where you can go to a shop and you can buy accessories, a suitcase caddy for your wheelchair or other accessories for the chair. You can't do that anymore. You have to go online and order it. So more companies in Connecticut would help, but they keep getting bought out. So somebody's making money. Just a comment.
Thanks, Rick. Okay. We covered a lot of interesting stuff. I think, does anybody have any other questions? Okay. Oh, Jonathan.
Yeah. One of the other promising things in the survey that I surveyed that I think could really help with the backlog, and I wanted to get the industry's feedback on this, is getting the overnight and expedited shipping contracts in place. and also pushing for insurance reimbursement for that. Is that something that we could also nail down as something that we all agree on that could work?
Jonathan, are you saying that a code would be developed and there would be payment for that? Because I can't speak, I'm not going to speak for Jenny. I'm not going to speak for the insurance companies. That's gonna be their decision.
No, yes, yes.
I don't spend other people's money.
No, yes, that's what I'm suggesting, because we know that a third of the delay, right, is when there's a shipping issue, and we've heard from several stories, Marine in particular, when something was shipped by ground, and really things should be shipped expedited all the time and overnight if possible, and that should be reimbursed. And I would just put that out there, that that's something that we should recommend.
Okay. Anyone else? I want to shift to talking about the next. So we have 2 more meetings on the books, the 14th and the 21st, and then the break for the Christmas holiday. So we have the report is due February 1st. I do think we will need to meet in January, but what I want to do is look at my calendar and have some discussions and give some thoughts to meetings in January. And I would appreciate ideas. Maybe we can talk about this at the next meeting as to what kinds of topics we might want to cover at the meetings, because I have a pretty good sense of where people are at, and I don't want to just have meetings to have meetings, when what we really need to do is start putting pen to paper. So the next 2 meetings coming up, I'd like people to, if you have any ideas right now, or email them to me about presentations or discussions that you think would be valuable to have as we move towards putting together our final report for this task force. Okay. So with that, if people don't have anything else, we'll see you on the 14th at 11:30. Chandra will send out the survey results as we promised, and we'll send out the minutes for both last week and this week. Okay. All right. And as always, I'm available in between meetings if you need anything. Thanks so much, everybody.